You're going to hit record?
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back for week 2 of this webinar series, Farming Forward, Creating and Monitoring Functioning Landscapes. Thank you for all the questions that came in during the week and photos. Graham's going to answer those and talk about your photos. We've had a busy week this week and some good news. Yesterday I went up to Smithton, monitoring on a dairy farm up there. So that's really exciting to have a dairy farmer engaged and looking to monitor the difference between the landscape functional cover crops and comparing it to what's on perennial pastures. So that'll be a really interesting trial in the next 12 months and forward from that. And then today I went out to the Elliott Research Station. They had a field day out there that was put on by TIA, Tas Institute of Agriculture. And two of the things that really jumped out for Ranch and for myself was that the virtual fencing people were there, and Megan that's doing some work with testing different virtual fencing systems, including halter, and they're interested in doing some work to see what sort of stock densities we can get. So that will be applicable to grazing management, so that we can push the animals up tighter, and also the convenience of being able to move the fences by phone and all those other sorts of things, and take some of the labour intensity out of moving the fences. And the other thing is that they've got a regen trial of sorts out at Elliott, and they're very open to working with us and putting a trial in with, sorry, somebody's just coming in, a group, to putting more trials in with a longer recovery. So that's really exciting for where rant's going in the future, and the sorts of things that we're trying to gather data on and prove outcomes one way or the other, sort of take the speculation out of things. So that's pretty exciting. So over to Graham. Go forth.
Thanks, Celia. Jump in with any questions. I've got some questions from people that have already been sent in. I'll just see how this works. Is that going okay?
Yep, you can see that.
Okay, I'll just reorganise a few things just so that I can see. Yeah, it's great to see people rolling in. It's not being very cooperative at the moment, but I'll get there. So, very good. Thanks again to the sponsors, the Future Drought Fund. It's been a good week. Things are going well. I've travelled up to the Sunshine Coast, which is sort of a bit hot for a southern Victoria. But yeah, it's all flying along. I'll just quickly skip through a few of these reinforcing things, and then if anyone can think of any questions or comments that they'd like to ask. I've got a few questions already, so we'll probably be good. But if I've skipped over everything, I went pretty quick last week to try and just sort of cover it so that you could be aware of the language and what we'll be talking about. But I'll go back and reinforce the language. There's been a few questions about that. But generally, I'm trying to get this idea of people and money are nested in a land that's increasing in landscape function. And landscape function is actually is it stable? Is it infiltrating water? Is it cycling nutrients? So it's the foundation, and we build diversity and biodiversity on this foundation of stable water infiltration and nutrient cycling. And I'll keep coming back to that. And I've also tried to pick up some slides of some photos of why we do this and where it's applicable and all that sort of stuff. So I'm really happy if you want to jump in at any stage, just yell out and let me know. This won't be due for an update for another, maybe next month they might do an update again. the end of March. Or, yeah, probably end of March, start of April. So yeah, so it won't be due for an update. Be interesting because I think that this is probably underestimating net farm income, and this is gross farm income. But it's the ratio that really worries me. You've got to make so many dollars to earn a dollar. So most of the money is going to farms. So typically over this period, it's about farmers are keeping somewhere between 16 and 10 cents in the dollar. And you need to change that around. The people that are going really well with grazing management, they're keeping 80 cents in the dollar, not 10 cents in the dollar. So we need to flip the way money is allocated in agriculture. And that means getting off inputs basically as a rule, and then being very shrewd about what inputs you use and how you actually increase your nutrient cycling, water infiltration, and stability. I'll quickly skip through all these. So if you want the land to be stable, it's got to be covered, soil cover and little cover. If you want it to infiltrate water, it's got to have a large basal cover of perennial grass. So the minimum basal area of a plant, so where it joins the soil, it's got to be more than 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters, and you need them really dense, about 30% of each hectare being covered with these mature perennial grasses. And I'll try and point that out as I go through with some slides up further. The other thing that we really need to keep working on is that we need litter between those perennial grasses. So if you've got 30% cover of those mature perennial grasses, you need 70% cover of decomposing litter. And I've got some of Matthew's slides up further that I think shows really nicely that shift towards more and more litter and more litter decomposition. It can be incredibly quick if you can get to go with this. And then how rough's the surface? You want some sort of rough surface. And then the same with nutrient cycling. You want those sugars being pumped by the perennial grasses. You want that decomposing litter feeding all the life in the soil so that you've got lots of amino acids and stuff to supply the nitrogen to the grasses. So, and you need it to be rough as well. So we'll keep coming back to that. So litter is the way we describe that material from the plant. So if we think of perennial ryegrass, it has 3 actively growing leaves. For the 4th one to emerge, the oldest one dies. That becomes the litter. That provides you with that stability, water infiltration, and nutrient cycling between the perennial grasses. So I've been trying to say it's the way sunlight gets into the soil for the life in the soil. It also comes in through the root exudates, the liquid carbon pathway, which was the term coined by Christine Jones, Dr. Christine Jones. There's a big issue that some people think that because that liquid carbon pathway is more important than the decomposing litter on the soil surface, that you don't need to worry about it. But it has an incredible impact on stability, water infiltration, and nutrient cycling. So it's not as important, but it is still important. And that's I try and say to people, it's like you've got the ute that uses diesel, oil, and water. Water is less important than the diesel and the oil. So don't worry about the water in the radiator. That's the way my brain thinks of it. It's ridiculous. You need all 3. So we need all 3 happening all the time, where you've got liquid carbon pathway, you've got decomposing litter, and then you've got this sloughing of roots. And there's lots of argument about how that actually works. But basically, there's a bit of a pulse of carbon into the soil. When you graze the top of the plants, there's a pulse into the soil. the roots don't all die. It's like feeder roots and stuff, but everyone's arguing about it. And you just need to know that it needs to happen to refresh the perennial grasses. So how's that? Is that okay for landscape function? Any comments or questions or thoughts? So some of the questions that have been coming in is what is landscape function? So it's about managing the soil surface so that you sort of massively reduce erosion or increase stability, you increase water infiltration, and you increase nutrient cycling. I think I've still got some photos up further. Utilization is how much of the plant you eat down. So if they're the leaves of the plant, do you eat them down 80%, 50%, or a third? And I keep saying this is another one that's really easy to check and to show. Sorry, I've put something in the chat. Yeah, Kelly, I'll come back to that. So the plant utilization, how much of the green leaves or the standing plant material do you actually eat? Not the litter on the soil surface, how much of it? So there's two schools of thought. There's one that if you only eat half the plant, that you'll leave the solar panels and it'll recover quicker. That's what works, but it actually results in degradation over time. And it's a really hard thing to explain. But what happens if you're the most palatable grass that's ready to be eaten in that paddock? You don't get 50%, you get 80 or 90%. So if you're the best grass, best is most palatable grass, best combination of protein, energy, and fiber for the animals, they don't go around mowing by height. They actually find a plant that they like and eat it down. And now you've been grazed down, and all the other plants, if you don't graze them down as well, this plant is at a disadvantage because you'll come back when everything looks recovered, but this really good plant hasn't recovered. So over time, you get a decay into monocultures of cocksfoot or phalaris in southwest Victoria, all those sort of things. So it's really important to know. And I've put other there, but that's great. So just Kelly, with the traditional soil testing, it's a lagging indicator of landscape function. So you could use it to confirm that what you're measuring on the soil surface. So I trained as an industrial chemist, so I'm very skeptical of laboratories and stuff like that. It's like one of those ones sort of know too much. But if it's been done quite a bit in Victoria, they get one soil sample, split it, and send it to different labs and get a whole different range of phosphorus and organic matter and stuff. So they're all supposed to be. I can't remember the name of the body that registers them, and they're supposed to be doing the test methods, but it's only as good as that. So I think that you can use them as a lagging indicator every now and again. But what we do know is if you increase landscape function, you increase phosphorus and phosphorus availability. You increase you balance the calcium magnesium ratio, and you also start to mobilize all your micronutrients. So everything tends to come up except for the iron, the aluminium, and the sodium, which tend to go down. And so it's one of those. I was doing a presentation, and the woman was a potato agronomist, and she just said, "Oh, well, that's a bit bloody convenient, Graham." We were friends, and I said, well, I think, if you're doing the right things and working on the center of gravity, I don't know how to even think about it or describe it. If you're doing the right things, multiple things fix. So you not only do you increase nutrient cycling, water infiltration, and stability, you also balance the calcium, magnesium. It actually fixes itself. So I'm saying, don't believe me. I'm not sure I believe me. And I tried it the other day that I would, yeah, most of the time when I'm on the farm, I live in a caravan. I've been saying I would never listen to a man that cuts his own hair and lives in a caravan. So yeah, like, but yeah, it's sort of like that. You know, I've spent so much of my life on this, and um, it's quite stark that if you do the right things, multiple things fix, and you're not having to fix something else because you did that. So it's not like taking pharmaceuticals. This is more like eating the right diet and exercising. Lots of things fix, and you don't have to worry about all the individual components. But I'd confirm those things, Kelly, with soil tests. Grazing isn't cutting the grass, so um, it can work all right. And at Port Fairy, we had a house at Port Fairy, and I mowed the lawn back into landscape function and diversity of grasses and stuff. It was very unpopular. Um, we had little kids at the time, and one woman said she wouldn't bring her daughter around. Um, wouldn't bring her daughter around because she'd get lost in the grass. So I'd ring her up and say, "Oh yeah, Jano, ready to bring Zoe around now. Yeah, I've just mowed it." So, and then she'd say, "Oh well, it's got all the dead grass sitting. It all end up in the car." Yeah, like it was like this rolling thing. But yeah, you can do it. It doesn't work as well where it's more seasonally humid or brittle, and I'll do a little bit about that. Um, yeah, and the capacity for pH buffering, all the pH is fixed. And there's a number of reasons that the pH is fixed as you increase landscape function. You stop leaking nitrates and ammonium out the bottom of the soil profile, and all the life in the soil mobilizes it. So the calcium magnesium fixes, the pH fixes as well. I had a sort of a article or something that I wrote for the Drought Hub on soil testing, soil testing for the Drought Hub, and we might attach that, the soil testing for the Drought Hub, if that's okay. I was looking for permission from El Presidente. Yeah, so
Yes,
it's
you have it.
I'm only vice El Presidente. Just the monkey, not the organ grinder. Yeah, so any other questions? But yeah, we've got lots of examples. There's also Sydney University that we did a big project looking at the farms that were doing grazing management and increasing landscape function with Dr. Peter Amt. And that's what we found. Not only did the carbon come up, the phosphorus came up and the pH came up at all, and that was in southern New South Wales. So but until you do this work and actually do it yourself, I was thinking today, I was talking to one of the trainers that I work with and stuff, and I said that there was a El Presidente of RANT. As soon as you actually create landscape function through trials and on your own property, there's a change and it becomes sort of like you actually know what works and what doesn't, but you've actually got to do it. So I saw Celia when we worked together and then increased the landscape function on her property, and the water infiltration changed and the species changed, and so many things changed. You actually go, oh, I get it. So that I thought that, so like if you don't believe me, I'd be asking Celia about that. And then when she did that work at Oakhampton at different ranges of recovery and see that there is nothing better than actually creating landscape function for you to go, oh, okay, I could do other things or I could just do that. So I've been doing with my safe to fail trials with people. I've been saying, put compost tea on it, put product X on it, do this to it, make it multi-species, but compare it to just managing perennial grass for landscape function. And then after a year or two, sit there and think about it and look at which one do you want to do more of. So one requires inputs and effort and work, and the other one's just using the animals. when I do that with people, a lot of them go, "Oh, I'm just going to do that." Um, yeah, I'm not a fan, Kelly, because I'd be talking to Celia about that as well. So, contours and key line and stuff. I think that this is the way I try and explain it, that try and do landscape function first. And if that doesn't work, then escalate up maybe to adding seed, then broadcasting seed, then escalate up maybe to resowing, grasses, then escalate up, and eventually you might get to key line and contours and stuff, but not within the next 15 to 20 years. I just can't see, the cost and the risk is too high for them. So I'd be doing small trials or borrowing machinery. I used to sort of talk about the when people see the key line or some sort of rotary, rotary tillage or something like that, they go and, "Oh, have I got enough money? Yeah, I'll go and buy one of those," and then they get it back and they attach it to their tractor, and then they go, "Oh, the tractor's not big enough. I wonder if I can get enough money for a bigger tractor." So we've got to stop doing that. That's what results in that increase in gross and decrease in net. So try and do these things first. You can run them in parallel, but make sure you keep allocation of money, allocation of time and effort, so that you're really clear what does work and what doesn't. So I'll go on. I've got
Would you like, did you want me to tell my swale story, or will that run us out of time?
I think it might. I've spent too much time, but
Okay.
next week.
Next week.
Yeah. So I think this is profound, but no one else agrees with me. And I go, I've developed this front end. What do you have to do to increase these indicators to increase landscape function? And recovery increases all of them. It increases the amount of material growth for soil cover. It increases the basal area of the perennials. It grows more litter. It allows the litter to decompose and become more complex. So David Johnson's sort of 9 months minimum for that static aerated compost to become complex. All those things are really important. And because the plants have grown more, you get more surface roughness from the perennial grasses. So recovery is essential for everything. Stock density does the same too. That action of the feet to put the litter on the ground, to germinate and stimulate the crowns of the perennial grasses, to get the litter in contact and decomposing. So mowing the grass doesn't do that. You've got to somehow then get the litter on, and also it changes that surface roughness. So that's how dense are the animals when they're grazing and moving around the farm. It's not the stocking rate, how many over the whole farm, it's how many over the area they're grazing today or in this sub paddock that you're in at the moment. So stock density is about how many. There seems to be a threshold that germinates perennial grass seed banks. And I think it's a scarifying with those animals, with their movement and twist of their feet, and also not looking because they're all jostling and things like that. So it's the point that their behavior changes so that they'll be bumping one another and they stop looking and they're eating and they're getting into it fast. Plant utilization is how deep you do it. The deeper you do it, the more you provide the germination conditions for the basal cover. So the deeper you graze, the more likely you are to provide that. And it also, that plant utilization also increases the impact of the animals, because they're there long enough that you actually get more decomposition of the litter.
So it's not just what goes down their throat, the utilisation, it's what's pushed down as well?
Oh, no, it's basically what goes down their throat. So it's the standing plant material. So, yeah, and you want you want it to be high. Typically, we'd say 80%, but it depends on how adapted the animals are. Because if you push animals that aren't used to eating like that, they will collapse. And I've done that multiple times, and I've trained people, and they've done that. So that's why I have those gut fills and dung scores. So in an attempt to stop people. But initially, if you've got unadapted animals and inexperience with being at density and stuff, you've got to start winding it up slowly and getting them tighter and tighter and deeper. And then if they're not maintaining gut fill and body condition, you back off. Because until you start to get the next generation through with the adapted genetics, you can't go any harder than that. But I'll keep coming back for that. So sorry, Spiky, what was the collapse? The animals?
The animals, you push the animals, like animals that aren't used to it, to collapse.
Yeah, so the animals will have very, very poor body condition, and you can actually sort of run them down so much in body condition that they get sick and sick from other means. So you're actually not giving them enough nutrient to maintain them. But the problem is when you're doing this, it's like the frog in the pot. You don't notice that they're losing body condition. So I say to people, get someone that doesn't look at them all the time to ask you, and ask them, how do you think they're looking? Do they look better or do they look worse? You need to be really onto this animal performance, and there's a question up later.
It's interesting you say that, because well, I've been worrying about them losing condition, but everyone tells us our cows are fat.
Oh, see, it's in the photo, I'll tell you. So, and yeah, because usually we use that body condition score, and we try and maintain the cows a body condition score 3 at minimum. So it's out of 5. And when so that body condition score chart, I'll put that in as well. I've got lots of charts on that, but it's just a score out of 5 of, you know, a rough guide to how fat they are. And they need to be 3. You know, they can get down to 2.5, but really you're trying to keep them at 3 or more. So that's interesting because, yeah. And then we sent this photo. This is Celia holding the Oakhampton trial, and David Tongway just described what he could see. And I'll dig it out. I had a quick look for it and I couldn't find it, but he was just describing that it had the full suite of decaying and processing, and yeah, like he sort of rambled on, didn't he? He really liked it. So, and it was created from sand really quickly. But I'll find that sort of. So we're trying to do that. That's just at Wattle Park after trampling, and just got that soil surface. Yeah, and you want it so that you could hit it with a fire hose and no soil would move. It's like Velcro pulling it out because of all the light dragging the litter into the soil. It's like gardening with animals and feet. It's not hard. I just threw this in just to sort of, I've been trying to think, how do I talk about basal area? So I thought on this track, because there's no litter, it actually helps sort of see. So it's these plants that are mature perennial grasses. Some of the, like that one's probably too small. That one might be too small. So where my red arrow is, that where they meet the soil, I'll get better photos. It's got to be 2 centimeters that way and 2 centimeters that way. So some of these plants are, and some aren't. So this is just on the track. So there's no litter. And this is over trampling sort of thing with me riding the buggy out and back all the time. And it just knocks it about. So it was all like that. This is my track, and I need to shift my track. Because we've got those cross fences of the single electric fences, you tend to pin those down so you can quickly drive to where the animals are, and you wear a track. But I need to stop and just shift the post and shift the track. So but it's every 100 metres, and I put in the, I'll get to that later. So that's pretty good. I find that if I can step, I know not everyone's as tall as I am at 5'7", but if I can comfortably step from one perennial mature grass to the next, it will fix very, very easily. And with this, all you would do is grow these grasses till they had fresh litter in, so that you start to fill the litter back into these spots. So it happens really quickly, and it's really easy to do once you're into it. So this was is Rob still there? I can't see.
Yep.
Oh yeah, sorry, Rob, missed you. I just tried to do a few things about the grassland. I haven't got a great deal, and I'll go through it, but I think there's a few things that we need to know. It wasn't so much, I found over time that it wasn't so much that they were worried about the predators. It was more that just to get fed, you had to stay moving, you had to stay bunched. So they love being a herd. Like ours don't have a predator, but if I separate them, like I took out the dry cows, and I thought I'll pull the steers out as well and leave them set stocked while I had the bulls out, because I didn't want to join those dry cows. And half the steers were back in by the next morning. Do you know, like, and they'd come through about 3 electric fences just to get back to the mob. So almost like bull behavior. So I'm thinking they love being in a mob. Once you got them used again to being close together, they only feel comfortable being in the mob. So it's in brittle environments that the herbivores, the large herds of herding herbivores ran. So and these are the environments. There's 2 types of environments, so I'll only do the extremes. One type you find under jungle or vegetation, which we call non-brittle in holistic management, the Savory Institute. This is Alan Savory's work. And the other, you find them under desert. So when the civilizations collapse, you find the ruins under jungle or in desert. So typically it was the deserty areas where the big herbivores ran, because they cycled the carbon when these areas had their seasonal dry periods. So these are the areas that typically had the herding herbivores. And most of Australia and most of Tasmania also did. So it's just a rough guide to where it is. About 50% of Brazil was a perennial grassland, and they had all the sweet predators and large herding animals and things like that. But everyone thinks that Brazil is all rainforest, not the 50% that was grassland. But that's what they've been cropping on, all their soy and corn, is basically on that. The problem is that they're moving in, and thank God Bolsonaro's gone, but they were moving into the rainforest and clearing that, and mainly for cropping, even though the description's always the rainforest is being cleared for cattle. The money, or what the main driver was, to plant corn and soy, and they only used the cattle on that land in the off season. So it's really quite weird when you're there that they don't. It's just agribusiness doing what agribusiness does, sort of raping and pillaging. So yeah, cows get blamed for most things. And this was where you had these big migrations of the herding herbivores. I find it really hard to find out how they actually work. So what I did was I went looking, and this is from people that sell safaris to go and see the Great Migration. So they had no interest at all in perennial grass recovery. I've been saying that they have no litter in the game, or no skin of the earth in the game, and no one seems to understand me. But basically, they don't care. They've just got to take the people to where the animals are going to be. So it's like a big annual rotation in a lot of these areas. Is it as smooth as that? No. But it was not coming back every month. Like that just didn't happen. So so we need with our safe to fail trials to determine what works on your land. But there's a lot of people talking a lot of stuff, and if you talk to scientists, you'll get 50,000 different views on it. I like this because they don't care. They've just got to take people to where the animals are. So they're not researchers. They're not grassland people. They've just got to satisfy the tourists. And then I started doing this thing where I said that you'd be carving here, then you'd be marking and joining here, and then you'd be weaning and sales. So I was trying to sort of overlay, managing cattle on this 12 months rotation sort of, but no one took to that either, I must admit. But yeah, so I'd be looking at those sort of things and asking those people. You ask 10 different grazing trainers, you'll get 10 different results, 10 different answers. So that's when I say, don't worry about that. Just do your own safe to fail trial. This is just recent. Oh, sorry, from a balloon. And this is just recently video from a hot air balloon. And I don't know whether you can hear it or not, probably can't hear it over me, but you can hear the zebras calling as they go as well. So it's quite extraordinary how this all used to work, and it's a fraction of what it used to be. So with the Great Plains video, I like watching these sort of things and different episodes and stuff like that, and watching the way. But I'm talking the stock densities I'm talking about, Robert, at this fire front that's going through the grassland. That's the density I talk about. And it's this color change. So I haven't seen any measured landscape functions, but they leave the ground covered. It goes from green to litter, green to litter. And I've been putting this up and saying green to litter, green to litter. So, excuse me. So this is, like all the young stock are back here. We have this thing that we've got to give young stock preferred grazing and things like that. Could you imagine these old cows at this front that's eating and going through the grassland, allowing the heifers to come up and get preferential feed? They'd kick them to the back and tell them, you wait until we're finished. So, and I see this in the cattle and things like that. Sometimes you've got to override it, but they're not being driven by predators. They're being driven by trying to get fed, and that density and trying to get fed. So if you can get any of those planet Earth, the Great Plains ones, I'd be looking at those because it really does sort of change the way. Some of it's wrong, but David Attenborough says that covers, I don't know, I can't remember what he says, a quarter of the planet. I think it's 2/3 of the planet. So I disagree with him on that. But when he says how it recovers and it feeds more wildlife, so grass, the great survivor, it feeds more wildlife than any other plant. And I go, and it is just like the background music for people. I just don't understand why. When I used to play the video when I was training and he mentions grass, I'd put my hands on my heart and almost fall on the ground, So we need to lift the profile and the importance of grass to sort of regenerative, sustainable. If we're going to have a planet to live on, we're going to have to fall in love with grass. It's really clear to me. I'll just skip over that. How are we going for time? I might skip over that, but I'll include the link in the notes so that you can watch it yourself. And it's
just one thing, Graham. Sorry,
Yeah.
I know you're in a hurry, but like if
Always.
we took out all
Always, Rob.
yeah, Sorry. If we took out all of the fences in our farm and just made it one big paddock, and we just let all the cows go wherever they wanted, they probably wouldn't go in a big herd, would they? Like they'd end up overgrazing it, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. So there's something about the size of the herd that changes the management. I think you've got to be up around that sort of thousands and thousands of them before it does it. Otherwise, you do not get this mobbing behavior. So there's a fair few animals there. Like this runs all the way back down there, back around here. And they're all moving through. So the size of the herd increases that. So we're actually cheating a bit. But that herd might have come together at one stage by predators, but now they feel safer to carve down. You see some of this family behavior and stuff, and I'm sure you've seen it. You know, mum standing with the daughter to have the baby, all this sort of stuff that we see. And it's like a whole behavior change once you put them back together. And the Americans that say reboot the herd instinct in them. Like there really is a change. So I think that you might have to get up to 200,000 before you get this sort of behavior of moving through the landscape. But it was the sheer number that was modifying that behavior. And that was what I was trying to say. We struggle to run really big mobs. So what we do is we use electric fencing to mimic that mobbing and herding and predator type stuff. There is a predator effect, but most of the time, then it reminds me of the Bugs Bunny cartoons and the sheepdog clocking on and clocking off with the wolf. Like most of the time, the predators are in the environment around them. And it's only when the predators switch on that they all worry about them. So it's almost like they're talking to one another. I wish I'd filmed dogs that used to guard the chickens. It was like the chickens would be sitting on them, but as soon as I turned up there, they chase all the chickens away. I'm working, boss. It was just weird behavior. So I'll send the link to this, but what it shows is that management changes on the same day in the same area. You can either have bare ground or you can have grass. I've tried to show those photos from Somaliland and that video from Benjamin and all that. We could turn the red centre of Australia back into the green centre. And if we did that, we would change. There is substantial human, and that's why I'm going back and using some of those African genetics, Spiky. We've picked animals for growth on grain, for most of the Angus and things like that. And I'm heading back the other way for shorter. So the heaviest, shortest animals, early maturing, and also you end up with better hormonal balance and things like that. So I was trying to explain to people that sort of these African genetics, they actually enjoy teasing me. They're a different type of cow. They run up and frighten me and then run away laughing. So, and the others are sort of like completely different. So it's going to be interesting to see how they grow out. So timing for best production. So this isn't straightforward, and there's always a compromise. There is no best time. There's a real thing that if you carve in your best grass growth, so let's say spring, where you are, Spiky, if you carve in spring at the start of spring, then they're easy to get back in calf because they've got this volume of feed that's green and feeding them and things like that. So I found that I tried this. We used to autumn calve in March, and then the thinking was spring calving better. I then went to spring calving, which doesn't work well in a Mediterranean environment because by the end of Feb in most years, you only had dry grass and you're trying to keep cows milking on dry grass and it didn't work. So I went back to April calving. And if you've ever tried shifting calving dates and things like that, it is and joining dates, it's no fun. So so really what we're finding, so Peter Reynolds and myself have talked about this a lot, is that we've got feed and we've got green understory for most of the year. So we've got more flexibility. And we've always got a volume of feed for them. So I would time it so that it was best for your calving and fertility, which has a really big impact on your profitability. So so I wouldn't worry about the killing. I'd be worrying about the joining, getting them back in calf is the key sort of, and having that short calving period, the bull out for 6 weeks type stuff, and then getting back in calf easy. And you really start selecting for, when you start doing this, you're selecting for the ones that have already cycled a couple of times before the bulls go out and they get in calf straight away. So some people are getting down to 30 days. I haven't got that organised to get that to happen at the moment, so that they get this short, sharp calving time. It's easy to manage. You put lots of effort into a month and then away you go. So yeah, so I'd time the calving rather than the killing. And I like the wild internet. The optimum point for killing is not age, it is how much fat they're carrying. So you've got two things competing, and I can do a talk a bit later on eating quality, but you're looking at tenderness, juiciness, and flavor. Now, tenderness is how much connective tissue and how hard to chew through. So when you bite meat, it's actually that bite through tells you about the tenderness, and that tells you, if assuming they've gone into rigor mortis and been managed evenly grown and all that, tells you how old they are and how much connective tissue. So the older they get, the tougher they get. But what we do is, if they're fat enough, you get the juiciness from the fat. So we get that juiciness from the fat stimulating the salivary glands, so that you get a burst of saliva and you go, oh, that's beautiful, moist meat. And then the flavor comes from the diet, what they've eaten. So grass fattened animals have better flavors. There is a few exceptions in northern Australia and stuff, but they've got better flavors than the low flavors you get from grain feeding. So it's a sort of a big thing like that. So if you're marketing them direct to consumers, you just focus on getting them fat and 4.5 to 5 body condition score, and then you send them to be slaughtered at that age. So really, people worry about the age because they get judged on how old they are if you sell them to other people to process. The supermarkets have a thing that they don't want them too fat because they don't like having to trim them, and they don't want them too old because they're worrying about the eating quality and things like that. But with your own, and there's a lot of people selling older animals that have got more flavor, flavor increases, and more fat, and juiciness increases, but they're slightly tougher and they're enjoying that meat a lot more because it's also higher in
Can I ask
nutrients.
a related
Yeah,
question,
sure.
but not related to regen? Turns out the steers that steer calves that came attached to our 2 cows are actually bull calves, and they're still on their mums. But I'm just wondering, I know that the bull meat taint is an issue, and I'm wondering at what point does that kick in? At what age?
It's sexual maturity, so it starts, but it really, it's not straightforward. It actually it depends. There's, like some bulls eat very well, some don't. Typically, they use bull meat for pies because it has a really high water holding capacity. So it's not a straightforward one. I'd be so if you're not going to use them as bulls, what are you going to do with them? Would be what are you going to grow them out?
Well,
more?
we had planned to grow them out.
How old are they now, Flo?
They were June calf last June,
Yeah.
and one of them is serving a couple of heifers, though he's not apparently viable yet because he's not quite 10 months.
Some can be viable at 5 months. So
Yeah, look, it wouldn't be a terrible thing because it wouldn't be a terrible thing if we got sort of an extra couple calves out of it, but it would
as
mess
long as
up.
as long as those heifers are sort of old enough to calve when they do that, yeah, there's that might be a bit more longer discussion, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a
I,
bit off
I'd be
topic.
I'd be separating them and either
Mhm.
getting a vet to come and castrate them or selling them or something, you know.
Well,
So
yeah, we've got quotes from the vet, and it looks like they might be being home butchered. We might be buying an extra chest freezer or two.
I find that really, yeah, it could be very awkward. You really, you don't want them too young when they're joining. I took out those little Mashona bulls at 5 months. Yeah,
Tell
5 months.
dairy farmers doing they're looking forward to.
Yeah, yeah, and oh, that's a good idea. But yeah, I'd be trying to separate and sort that out. You know, so. Thanks for that. Yeah, happy to talk longer. Just quickly, how do you get animal performance on grass at this time of the year? You've got to increase the stock density and you've got to increase the number of moves. There's no real secret. The other thing that a lot of people do is to give them some sort of rumen supplement like urea or lucerne pellets or something that's got a high portion of protein in it. So it's the protein that allows them to process that long recovered, more fibrous grass. So somewhere you'd have to do something like get some sort of proteiny supplement. I haven't seen any of the other minerals work. Typically, people use like what they call the Mucosca brew or some sort of urea lick, which I'm sort of allergic to, or lucerne, which I'm sort of allergic to as well, just because I've never seen lucerne grown in a regenerative way. So it just destroys the planet. So, you know, you get animal performance or you work harder and you triple. So we typically, as it dries off, we decrease the paddock size or the area that we give them and move them more frequently. So there's usually green in underneath it with our management, with our longer recovery. If you do short recoveries in spring, you take all the green out from underneath. We hold that so that we've got a bit of a protein supplement in underneath with the green feed underneath it. So,
well, that's where we've come unstuck this year because the wallabies took it in winter, took that green out.
Yeah. Yep. Shoot. I mean, you can't say that.
Yep.
Yeah. So somehow you need to control that. So, just quickly, I wanted to just show some of Matthew's photos beforehand. I just asked him how it was all going. He's doing things better. Things have changed fast. Cow health is good. Cell count has been the lowest. Still feeding some grain, but I do plan to drop as that improves. Reduce the fertilizer, reduce the tractor use. Costs are well down, and they're working 7 to 8 hours rather than the typical 12 to 24. I would have said on a lot of dairies. So and it was good, and it felt like I've probably mucked up the photos, Matthew, but I tried to put them in from when I remembered them. So I've probably got the dates, but I thought this was early on, with bare ground between the grasses, some safe to fail trials, starting to get some growth. Still got some no litter between these, which is typically what you see in most grazing management. Even when they've got really good dense perennial ryegrass, you'll see this bare ground and it'll be capped and sealed. You can see that sort of smooth in that area. And then start to get some litter in it. I remember this, you bringing it to the workshop and showing me. I remember this one. So what Matthew did, he trialled the grazing on his heifers, and the out paddock is what I remember. So anything I say that you find offensive, jump in. And then within 12 months, you had, if I've got the dates right and stuff, you started to get this visible fungal attack in the litter, and that's quite extraordinary. So it's incredibly quick when you start doing the right things. It fixes really quickly. Some trial photos, some gut fill photos. So, so that one's a low 3. I'm saying that needs to be smooth across here when cows and heifers and stuff like that are on recovered grass. So, that's a good photo of, she's in good condition. She's just, she's shiny. She's got fat on her. She just hasn't had enough to eat today. And I need to update my photos on my gut fill scores and stuff. So looking good. There's that one there. Starting to get litter in the system over time. Looking at dung scores, starting to get, I would have said the health was improving. All those sort of things. Using lots of electric fencing, also doing some trials on cover crops, litter increasing and getting diverse, more litter, getting deeper plants, starting to see better growth from the nutrient cycling, starting to fuel the soil so that it starts to grow its own, and then advance it on to from just using the growing stock as the practice to actually using the dairy cows. So I thought that all that was just fantastic, and really good sort of, good utilization, good things happening all around. So, and just to cover crop to finish. This was a guy, sorry, I forgot about this. This is a guy I'd worked with in Northeast Victoria, the Kiowa Valley, and these were going really well, but it was a very, very humid year, and they ended up with some sort of fungal attack in the paspalum. These cows were just flying. They loved it, and they're organic, so it just worked for them on so many levels to not have to be supplementing with expensive stuff, and growing their own feed for them was just fantastic. But then they run into this problem, and other people have run into problems with endophyte and the perennial ryegrass and fungi attack and things like that. So it's just one of those things that you've got to work on, monitoring and making sure that you're managing properly. So how was that? Did I go on too long? Any comments, questions, thoughts? I can't find my mouse. It's hiding. There's everyone back here. How was that? Did I answer any questions? Did clarify anything? Just that there's only really 2 things I want you to be expert at. I want you to be able to know landscape function really well and how to do safe to fail trials. So if you were working with a new farmer or talking to a neighbour or doing that, what you have to do, and I'll keep it in the PowerPoint, but you have to sort of break it down to a level that you agree together. most farmers want their land they want to leave it better than what they found it, is the language they use. I then have to ask them, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by the land better? Because I've run into farmers that it means that they've got full nutrient status on the land, so that they've added all the phosphorus and the gates all swing and the fences are good. Do you know, that meant leaving it better, and it wasn't what I thought. That wasn't what I was thinking. Yeah, I was thinking the pastures and the landscape function and the biodiversity. So you've got to confirm that with them. Then what trials would you like to do to come back up? So you break it down till you agree. Then what trials will I do with, on this farm? And then is it okay if we put in one that, maybe 12 months recovery, high stock density, high utilization, so that you sneak your one in, and then get to compare them all, and you amplify the ones that go well and you dampen the ones that don't go well. But you don't pick a winner or a loser, because in complexity that just doesn't make sense. So you have to have this sort of breaking it down until you find a level that you agree with people, then working out how to recombine and come up to the trials, then run them all in parallel, small safe to fail trials, multiple projects, and then you can agree from there on the road forward. So that's the sort of thing I'd really like it. And I think, we need to cover off on animal performance again, eating quality I can do more of, stock density, all those things we can do over time. But I wanted to just bed in that, what we're talking about, that landscape function, large perennial grass basil area, a lot of each hectare covered with decomposing litter. If you do that, most problems will fix. So that's the promise. So hope that's okay. Any thoughts, comments before I go?
Thank you very much,
Is that all
Graham.
right?
Yeah, it's great. A quick
Hope so.
reminder. Sorry? Yeah.
I hope it was all right. I do
Yeah.
get talking.
So we're going to use the same Zoom link each week. So we'll be back next Wednesday at 6 p.m. But also to put in your diaries for March is that we're having a workshop at Toledo in the northeast, and also a landscape monitoring, how to physically monitor the landscape. Gosh, there's somebody coming in now. How to physically monitor the landscape through the process, the landscape function analysis that David Tongway and Norm Hindley developed. So we're doing that in the Huon Valley on the 15th. Yeah, Friday the 15th of March.
Friday.
Yeah, so there are a couple of workshops coming up ahead. And we've got Spiky. It'll either be my place or at Marshall Roberts at Glen Huon. So yeah, that's the state of play.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. David, if you want to stay on, I'll have a chat with you about I think we might have got the time wrong. Oh, Graham's gone. Cool.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody. Hey, David.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks, Christy. Yeah, it was it was 6
Thank
o'clock.
you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. See you. We're going to.
Yeah, I'm not on daylight saving, so I thought at the last minute I thought I bet you it's at 5 my time, which is okay.
Yeah.
I just had an animal routine that I had to do